And we're back with the next episode of the Irrelevant Podcast. I see we've been triggering a lot of people lately. Um, we're owning the libs. Full full Daily Wire moment right here. Even though,
You're Jewish, just like Ben Shapiro.
and
I just,
I'm just
I have to throw that out there.
That's right.
You're one of the other people.
All right. Well, we don't want to get the video taken down in the first 10 seconds. Don't like move that too much because it's
No.
like hanging on. Yeah. All right. Um, so Um, based on a comment we got on our last podcast about the Hegelian dialectic, a gentleman asked me what our thoughts were on the Catholic Church's involvement and participation um, in slavery historically in the New World and in the Mediterranean, um, and how he points out that at times the church did attempt to make conditions better, right? And talking about the dignity of man, but they still had a huge role to play in slavery. And he also asks, the what is the Bible's actual position on it? Because there's a lot of confusion about that. So we thought that we could do a whole episode on Spanish colonialism
Yeah.
and just colonialism in general. You know, empires and just all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah. So, what do you think we should start with?
I mean, I think we should start with the beginning of, Spanish colonialism. But before we get into the, the Spanish sailing across, it was the Spanish. Um, Columbus was Italian, right?
He was Italian, but he was
He
funded
was he
by
was
the.
funded by the Spanish monarchy,
Yes, yes,
and he discovered the New World, and that was in 1492. But another event that I'm pretty sure it happened in 1492 also was the end of the Reconquista,
yes,
and
and that is crucial to
yeah,
understanding
and
Spanish
this is a
colonialism.
very important thing to understand with Spanish colonialism is that you know the you know Muhammad 600s, I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
Islamic empires expanded their way across in the Middle East and across North Africa and made their way into Spain.
Yeah, like
The
from Morocco.
they were
Yeah,
called the Moors, I believe.
yeah,
And they even got into France and they were defeated at the Battle of Tours. And but the Muslims, they got, they penetrated Europe many times, uh
on that end in the Iberian Peninsula, and also
yeah.
later in they got to Vienna.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the to get to Spanish colonialism, you really have to look at like to the mindset of the people at the time. These were medieval people, these were, you know, Catholic people, and these people were basically fighting for the survival of their nation. Um,
right.
in the Reconquista. I mean the Muslims they took over pretty much all of Spain,
And
uh,
Portugal, they
and
had the
Portugal too.
entire, yeah, they had the entire Iberian Peninsula, and it
And
was formerly Christian
yeah,
territory.
and yes,
Yeah,
like there was like, you know positive things that came out of the the caliphate. I forget the actual name of the caliphate. There's a lot of different
the
caliphates.
Umayyad, I think it was.
Uh,
I think it
I
was the.
think, yeah. Well,
Don't quote us on this, but I think it was.
I know
Yeah,
that I think the Umayyad Caliphate was the largest caliphate, and that's like what like ISIS and all those groups like try to get back to.
right.
But it's like they want to basically recreate the Umayyad, you know,
Yeah, Caliphate.
and that's where the caliph comes from,
Yeah,
like the leader. But anyways, going back to Spain, the Spanish, I believe they're, what are they, Visigothic? Ostrogothic.
It's a combination, but generally speaking, yeah, like
Yeah,
they were
and you
Visigoths.
know
Yeah.
they're speaking vulgar Latin, and you know that later develops into Spanish, and you know you'll probably have a lot more to say on that than I will because you actually are pretty much fluent in Spanish.
Right.
Um,
You're getting there,
I'm
dude.
I'm getting there. I
Your
learned
Spinner's getting good,
yeah,
dude. Yeah.
it's yeah. Um, but anyways, Reconquista. I would say the Reconquista was for at least a few centuries.
Well, yeah, and that's what people need to understand is that the Reconquista and then also um, the conquering of the New World, it wasn't just some people woke up one day and decided to be mean and invade someone's
It
territory.
like yeah,
Um,
Spanish colonialism kind of in a sense was an expansion on the Reconquista because in 14 I believe it was the same year that Columbus discovered the New World. I believe that's when the Reconquista ended with the Grenada.
yeah,
Grenada was the last
1492.
is
Yeah,
Islamic nation to fall in Spain. And so you know I guess at this point you can call them Spanish and Portuguese peoples. You know when they went out into the New World, they were you know fighting for their existence for you know hundreds of years, and they were very martial culture at this point, very vigorous, very energetic. They finally got their homeland back that was taken from them, and so they you know Columbus discovers the New World, and
but keep in mind, you need to take into account um, the whole dissemination of information, guys. Like it wasn't like a lot of people at the time, like after the Reconquista, and they finally defeat the last outpost of Islam there. Like there was no maps that you could just look at in the world and updated like the internet and see, okay, here is where all the Christians are, here all the Muslims are. Like a lot of people thought that literally, and also they didn't know what the globe looked like. Oh, there's a lot of world that there's a lot of land we hadn't discovered yet, right? So like
well, I think
they
this is
didn't.
before Magellan too.
Well, yes, and so also like they didn't know they hadn't mapped out the whole world yet. They had no concept of all this. So like a lot of people thought that the rest of the world had probably already fallen to Islam,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, was well, yeah, like because you gotta remember, like there was like the Western world, but the Western world at that point was basically like the Muslims cut off Europe and also Christianity from the rest of the world.
Yeah, and that's a very important point that XTube makes in his video is
Mhm.
that a lot of what we think of as like the quote unquote dark ages, a lot of what people obviously the obviously was not as bad as we think of it is in like the pop imagination, but even the bad stuff that there was, a lot of that is actually to blame to the Arab pirates that cut off
Yeah,
all of our trade routes in the Mediterranean. Like there was
yeah,
no access to North
and
Africa
yeah,
and the rest of the Near East and
yeah.
the Middle East and all that stuff, right?
So and you know it was uh even in public school, you know, they taught us that a big reason for the colonization was actually to convert the natives of these lands, and that you know as a Catholic, you know, I believe that's a noble cause. And the thing is, like, there's the objective of the church, and then there's the objective of basically
Temporal
warlord,
secular ruler, exactly.
your warlord. I mean,
Right.
you know, the thing is that in that society just about everyone was Catholic and everyone was part of the church. And when everyone is
Mm.
part of a church in this is when everyone is part of an organization in a society, you're gonna get all the different types of people.
Yeah.
So again, like I don't think you know a lot of these horrific actions, like
Which there were. I mean,
mhm,
but
you have to focus on the people who are doing it.
right.
You
Yeah.
know, because it's kind of like with anything else where it's like if you're a certain gender or a certain age or a certain race, like you have a commonality with a person that is the same gender as you or the same race as you, but that doesn't mean
Right.
that you're guilty of the sins of the other person. I forget what fallacy is that again? I forget. Like it's like it's like
Oh, that's the genetic or the genitive fallacy, which means that the thing in question is assumed to be wrong because of a perceived defect in the source, right? So that's
yeah.
why a lot of people, um, because they just assume Christianity is wrong, they think that anything that like bad that was done by Christians, that's like attributed to Christianity.
Yeah, and uh when so the Spanish they start colonizing the New World and they send a lot of monks
Yeah, missionaries and
to
whatnot.
the Dominican Republic, the Dominicans.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I believe that the island of Hispaniola was the first like colony in the New World,
It was, I want to say it was Puerto Rico.
or
It was one of those
but there
islands because those are the
it's
first
in
that
that it's
stick
in
out.
that chain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that and also there's some settlements in Florida that are literally almost like
Yeah, like
500
Saint
years old.
Augustine.
So yeah, St. Augustine.
Um,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and then also, basically the point of us making this video is how I mean I would say that I think Spanish colonialism was a good thing.
yeah,
Like, and I mean I know people are gonna get like furious when I say that, and you're gonna start typing, but I mean I just really like to explain this. I mean people won't shut up about how the people were enslaved and the blah blah blah. It's like, well, guys, these native peoples were enslaved before,
yeah,
anyways, right? And so even so, like, I, like you're enslaved before they were enslaved before by their demon worshipping overlords, right?
yeah. Like literally humans sacrificing um pagans.
Yeah, like
Like
guys, you
they would
can't bullshit
kill
that.
thousands of people every day. And like the thing is, like, look at Hispanic people now. They're not like, yes, there's cartels and yes, there's crime, but they're not, you know, sacrificing each other on altars anymore for demons.
Yeah,
And is Latin America perfect? No. I mean, you and I know this because we're married to a woman from El Salvador,
I
and I'm
am. Yeah,
about to marry a woman from El Salvador, and and like, but the thing is, like, at least in that culture, in the Latin American culture, at least Catholicism is still, as your brother says, is a Catholic Middle East,
yeah,
and
yeah. I guess I'll like.
in Catholicism,
I'll elaborate on that in a
yeah,
second. For
and Catholicism, allows comfort for like family formation, like societal trust.
yeah,
It it
culture,
it,
the
it
arts, and
um it kind of like destroys like the tribalistic clan warfare.
yeah, the
That
treatment of women gets
the
better.
treatment of women gets better.
Um,
You're not just a slave to your husband. You're you're an equal. Like not you're an equal in the sense to where you have equal value.
equal rights, equal
Yeah,
dignity.
like you have
Yeah,
equal dignity and equal rights, but you're not equal as to say that you're the same,
yeah,
because you can have equal dignity and equal rights, but you could be different, and it's okay to be different. I mean, it's anyways, so I think another thing is like, yes, there was a lot of violence and subjugation, and like, were priests around during that? Yes, of course, but
yes. But I mean, obviously, some of the greatest
yeah,
saints in the Catholic Church were slaves or were
mhm,
ardent defenders of slaves, right? Like Saint Patrick, he was a slave almost his whole life. Saint Martin de Porres, he was the bastard child of a Spanish nobleman and a slave African woman, and he was dealt with terrible racism his whole life. But what he kind of realized is, well, is it suck? Yes, but I know that Jesus loves me, and you kind of have to just you got to let that go. And the best thing you could do is pray for the people that
well,
are racist to you. You know?
and the thing is, like, that is better for your soul than being part of a religion that you sacrifice your neighbor. You cut you cut their heart. And yes, I know that like not all, you know, what do they call, pre-Columbian cultures did
Yeah,
this. But what I'm
obviously.
saying is, like, there were major you know, empires, the Incans, the Olmecs, the Aztecs, the
The
Mayans.
Mayans, yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, also the other thing is like, yeah, they weren't a monolith, right? And like many
mm-mm.
indigenous peoples hated the Aztecs because the
Yeah, and they
Aztecs were,
sided with the Spanish. And that's
yes,
another thing is, when the Spanish got to this, it wasn't like all the natives were united and they were all being solely oppressed by the Spanish. It
no,
was the Spanish landed, the Spanish thought everybody was Muslim, and so they
right.
basically
Given their
yeah.
guys, because people's brains like just didn't
Well, you
work
gotta
the
remember
same, like
you
how we perceive the
you gotta remember
world. Like,
Europe was cut off from the rest of the world by Islam. So they believe that it when they saw the temples in what's the native name for Mexico City
Tenochtitlan,
to Nochidlan?
yeah,
They literally thought like the temples were mosques.
yeah.
And um and like that may sound absurd, but like you gotta think about like what these Spanish people like went through and what their experiences and what they know about the world. The world was a lot smaller back then. And
Yeah,
when
exactly.
everyone who isn't a Christian is either a Muslim or a Jew, and you go to a new land that is filled with, you know, something you don't understand, you might attribute it to something you already know, which is Islam.
And even so, and like just imagine seeing all of that human sacrifice and just hellish
Yeah, and like
imagery and just dark liturgy.
well,
Like,
it's the thing of it is it is actually demonic.
yes,
And
exactly.
is like I just I'm never going to support, you know, evil, but I also want people like I'm not supporting evil. I'm not necessarily defending the Spanish. I'm just trying
I
to
am.
yeah. Well, I mean in some aspects, like the Spanish were like mischaracterized.
Well, and that's partially, well, not partially, it's almost literally just because of the British, right?
Yeah.
Because they were Spain's maritime rivals at the time, and they were Protestant, and
Yeah.
and Spain was
Yeah.
Catholic, so you know.
Evil Catholic priest, yada yada yada.
Oh, and
We've heard
one
it a
they
million
also
times.
made up the like the what's called the Black Legend, and it's like, ooh, like the conquistadors are just a bunch of greedy assholes going and pillaging the poor native people just
Mhm.
for gold. They're greedy, right? Like that's all made up, right? Because
Yeah.
guys, it's like given what we're talking about with the dissemination of information, how people's brains worked and just the like what the whole point of this all was, given they're fought the longest war literally probably in human history, which is the Reconquista, right? And then now, okay, literally probably every other part of the world might be Muslim. We have to stop that,
Yeah.
right? Because we spent all this time doing this and we did it.
But
So like it wasn't just people wake up one day and decide to be mean and go to some land and kill people. That's literally nonsense.
so I think we have to explain why it was such a bad thing for the rest of the world to be Muslim.
Yes. Um I mean, that's
I mean,
I think we might get too sidetracked on
no,
that
no,
because that's
no, like just real quick because um, I'm not saying we should just go into the whole Islamic thing, but
no,
um,
that's not really what I
no,
wanted
no,
to touch on.
Islam is fundamentally opposed to Catholicism.
Yeah,
That's just simple as it is. Like
fundamentally opposed to Christ and
it's
his
it's
teachings.
it's
Like,
the Islamic God is not Jesus.
nor is he Yahweh.
He's not God. The
No,
Islamic God is not a Christian God.
no.
And and the Spanish knew that. And there's this religion that promotes, violence towards, women. And like in Catholic cultures, like, do women get treated as well as they do in like Sweden?
I guess not.
I
But
guess not. But like you gotta, like it's like you really have to focus on like what is the bigger fish to fry here. Like because no culture is gonna be perfect, but like some cultures are better than others.
That's right. Yeah.
And the Islamic culture promotes violence and you know uh yeah, I mean
I
that's
mean,
that's
literally almost every single evil thing you could think of.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, and now I think is a good time to talk about the Islamic slave trade
well, yes, and exactly, and
because
Islamic
not
colonization.
only
Yeah.
not only did like okay, were there Catholics that engaged in slavery? Yes.
Well, yes, but also the comment asked me about the church and their involvement in
Yeah.
it. You have to understand. And I know I sent you the comment, whoever you are. Thanks for giving me the comment and inspiring this video. But just I guess for the rest of the audience, if this makes sense, like there's historically been a huge conflict between the church and the actual sort of temporal states and like
Yeah.
governments, right? So like, and especially like later into like the 16th century and like the 17th century, that's when there started to be a huge like um anti-clericalism,
Hmm.
right, from the Enlightenment, right, and there was lots of that sort of concept we have of like the separation gradually of the church and the state. That's basically around the time it was happening, right, and it was challenging, and the Enlightenment challenged these like conceptions we had about authority and government and the church and whatnot. But so like a lot of the like the slave traders and the slave owners, and right, like I mean they weren't like priests going out and do this. In
Yeah.
fact, the priests more often than not, like St. Peter Claver from Colombia, he would always do his best to, like, if he saw a slave getting whipped, he'd stop him, and
Yeah.
he would help slaves. He'd teach them the gospel and everything, because like you gotta remember, like the average like slave owner was probably not teaching their slaves the gospel. I'm not saying like
Yeah.
not obviously like not
Well,
every.
unless you're a Southern Baptist.
Well, yeah, and we could talk about the English colonialism, but also, yeah, like but wait, what was I just talking? I lost the train of thought.
You
Like,
you were talking about the separation of like the temporal power
well, yeah,
and
no,
the Catholic
exactly,
Church.
and the popes have talked for centuries about the dignity and rights of man,
Yeah.
and
Like
how,
Christianity literally says like you are made in the image of God.
yeah,
Like if
like,
you're a human. And the thing
yeah,
is like
exactly.
I don't think this when you gotta remember like the Jesuits wanted to convert these people. The Spanish didn't view these people as not human
No,
because you
exactly.
can't convert you can't convert a cow to Christianity because a cow doesn't really have a religion.
Yeah, I mean they're not a person,
Yeah,
but you can convert a
but the thing
person to
is like
Christianity. Yeah.
they were still at least considered people, you know? Like were they considered maybe equal? No. We gotta remember
Here and there. I mean, but
also like when you show up on a boat and you have horses and you show up on a boat, you travel all across the ocean, you're on that like a lot of those people that are on the boat, they're not really like the most faithful people in the world. A lot of them are just like
some of them were, I'm sure, but
well obviously no, but what I'm saying is like
yeah,
sailors have a reputation.
kind of like military dudes,
Hmm.
right?
There's a reputation there. Oh, I want to fight. I want to do things that are very contrary to the Catholic Church teaching.
And I'm gonna get away, and I'm gonna be away from
And
the mother
I'm gonna
country,
be
and
really far away from the Pope and the
ain't
Church.
nobody gonna figure it
And
out. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Willie.
What's up?
Do you always follow what the Catholic Church has to say every second of your life?
Absolutely not.
Neither do I.
Right.
And that's not to excuse bad actions, it's to excuse sin. But, it wasn't like the Catholic Church sent over like not every and and it wasn't even the Catholic Church sending them in some cases. It was the monarchy of Spain. It wasn't like the
Yeah.
Pope sat there and said, "You need to colonize this, enslave these people and that." It's the Pope had to work with so everybody was
No, actually,
Catholic.
more often than not, the Pope said, like, in his letters to noblemen and monarchs, like like in the age of exploration, he's like, these people are people too. If you enslave any of these people, you are excommunicated. That's what a lot of
Yeah,
people don't
and
understand.
that
Like it's not the evil Catholic Church turning the like literally.
so so really, um, I'm not really gonna give you like my opinion on this. I just kind of want to like uh explain something that like I read in public school.
Mhm.
So in public school, we had a little short chapter on Spanish colonialism, and in the who was it that it was Hernan Cortez? He took down the Aztecs.
He did, yeah.
But who was the one that took down the Incans?
Francisco Pizarro.
Yeah, I think they were cousins, were they?
I can't remember.
Hernan Cortez and what was the name again?
Francisco Pizarro.
Yeah, so I heard this I read actually, and this was a few years ago, so and the details probably won't be exact, but the
Hmm.
gist of the story was that the conquistadors they went up into the Andes Mountains, and they're confronting the like I don't remember if it was the actual Incan emperor or if it was like some sort of
I
Incan
want to say it was the Incan
priest,
Emperor. Yeah.
but basically um uh the Catholic priest held out the Bible as in like you guys need to convert to Catholicism. You guys need
Right.
to accept the gospel and you, you guys need to accept the gospel and and so where was it? You accept the gospel and the Incan priest or the emperor, I forget who it was. I think he spit on the Bible
Yeah, something like that.
and don't remember exactly, but I think the priest even like gave him like a second chance. Was like, "You guys need to convert," and he spit on the Bible again. And then there was a fight, and the Spanish completely decimate all of the Incan warriors.
Right.
And um, I just kind of wonder what would you have to like? What's your comments on that?
Well, I mean, I guess what you have to understand is that the ancient world, and I mean, even like the world to this day, honestly, um, even at that time, the world is brutal. You
Yeah,
know, I mean, like, I'm not trying to sound like you're like redneck atheist, like
dad, who's
who's
like
like,
telling you to
you
tough
gotta be
up.
a real man.
Yeah,
That's what the real world is like. But given the mindset these people had, right? I'm not saying that this is okay per se, right? Don't take this wrong way, but um, given that these people literally um rode in a boat like thousands of miles across the ocean to get here, and then they see all of this stuff that's like literally like alien to them, right? And then there's people in the countries back home that are counting on them to, you know, get something, find something,
yeah,
right? Because given the global threat of like, Islam or whatever it is that they perceive, right? And then um like to see all that and like just to like go back with nothing, like yeah, I'm sure you gotta remember, like a lot of these people were answering to higher ups, you
yeah,
know? And that's just, I mean, is that sad? Yes, it is, but that's just, I mean, that's just, it is what it is. And also, um, you know, like,
yeah.
sorry,
No,
sorry,
yeah,
something else is going on.
yeah. There was also like a di- huge difference in the technology. I think
Yeah,
like 500 Spanish, something like that. Like it was just like a few hundred, Spanish, basically medieval warriors. I think this was before muskets.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, this was before muskets, and later on they would have muskets. But like, these were basically medieval knights, and they basically conquered an empire. I think Mexico City or the had more people than London. at
Yeah,
that
they had a
time,
lot of people.
and it's insane. And the thing is, like, oh man, the natives are decimated, and it's like, okay, first of all, like, not all the natives were enemies of the Spanish. Second of all, the disease killed 90% of the people. It wasn't a genocide.
No, and there wasn't like intentionally, oh, they knew, like no. And also, like going back to what I was talking about, the, like the answering to the people higher up back in the home countries, and they're counting on you to help out the homeland, right? Like it's not just for greed,
Yeah.
right? Like, and Hextube in his other video actually about colonization makes a really good point that I agree with. I'll put the link of the video in the description, talking about how even like a lot of people at the time like didn't always think that like a lot of this colonization and slavery was okay, but they just thought if we don't do it, then somebody worse might do it.
Yeah.
So like we
Well,
just
imagine, for example, if the Muslims they did, colonize Mexico, for example.
yeah,
Imagine what they would do to those people. And the thing is, oh well, maybe they would just convert them and treat them well. You got to think about what they did to the native people of North Africa, of Spain, and then there was the whole Arab slave trade where they basically take all the sub-Saharan Africans and brutalize them for a lot longer
and
and in a
kind of
lot
still
more
do it today.
and they still, yeah, it's still going on today, and a lot more sinister. Was the transatlantic slave trade horrible? Yes, of course, but uh
Could have been worse. I mean,
well,
that's kind of what you
the
have to.
the Arabs would castrate the men,
Yeah, that's right.
and um like, what's crazy, there were black slave uprisings in Iraq.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's how many black people they were taking. and
Wow.
and they were, they're castrated, so they wouldn't be able to reproduce, so they'd have to go back for more and more and more and
Oh
more
man,
people. Um, and they would in the you know what you have to do to get your slaves from sub-Saharan Africa? Think of the word sub-Saharan. What do you have to cross? The
Saharan
Saharan
desert.
desert.
Yeah.
And like 50% of the people would die. Of the slaves would die going across, and that was that was just seen as like, oh, like that's just normal. I still can make money off of this. Think about that. And this happened for hundreds and hundreds of years. And eventually the Christian world banned slavery, got rid of slavery, and the
Yeah.
Catholic Church never really supported slavery. Imagine if the Islamic world took over basically Mexico all the way down to Tierra del Fuego.
Yeah.
Imagine how Imagine how much more pain and suffering would be in our world, and how many people would actually have been genocide
Yeah. No, and also
and enslaved. You can point at the West all you want and say, slavery this, slavery that, and yes, like,
for sure.
what we don't. The Christian world doesn't have slaves anymore. The
Yeah.
Islamic world still does.
Well, yeah, guys, because in the even like if you read the Bible and like in the Old Testament, like from the beginning of time, God, like especially in the first ages of man, has like tolerated certain evils just because it was kind of necessary at the time to protect against larger evils,
Hmm.
right? Like people sneer at the fact of like, oh well, if in biblical time, like in the law, like oh if your husband dies, you have to marry his brother, but it's like that literally provided a safety net for women, right?
Yeah, because
Which
then
other cultures didn't
because
do that.
and like is that like the ideal situation? But
No, but
the thing is, if you're an unmarried woman and that
in
you
the
got
brutal ancient
and you
world,
got to remember,
yeah,
this is before nation states, and these are big tribal herder people. When there's another hostile tribe right next to you, and if you're a woman, or if you're a widow, And I think even in the law, like it doesn't necessarily mean that like your brother, you're having sex with your dead brother's wife. I mean,
I don't really
I
know
don't really
about
know. I
that.
think, I mean,
Well, if you marry someone, it's assumed that you do, but I
well,
don't
I
know.
mean, Mary and Joseph, they didn't have
Yeah,
sex. But
that's right.
anyways, it's just evil. Evil is a part of our world, and the Catholic Church doesn't really support. It's not saying, go out and conquer and slaughter all these people and crucify them and enslave them and
Even if a
rape
lot of
them.
people did do that, which is
But
very sad and
no,
unfortunate.
there are other religions that don't have an issue with that.
Yeah,
And and I think, you know, the colonization was inevitable. If it was going to be from, Christian Catholic Europe or from the Islamic world or from China even, I think that they got the best end of the stick. And
yeah,
was it perfect? No. And do I understand why people are mad at the Catholic Church and mad at us? Yes, I understand, but like it it could have been a lot worse under different kinds of people.
yeah. No, and so the question, I guess, of the church's teaching on slavery and also slavery, is it evil or is it intrinsically evil or not in the Bible? Um, the Pope, the current Pope, said that um, in because I know there's controversy about his stance on the death penalty. All he said is that it's not necessary anymore, and slavery is the church's official teaching on slavery, and he mentions it in that same encyclical. He said that like slavery is it's not necessary anymore, right? Because um, we've experienced so many paradigm shifts, and we've had all these technological advancements to the point where you know like we don't have to have it anymore,
Yeah.
right? Because slavery in the past was actually used to, or slavery or servitude, I guess, because a lot of people, the connotation, people think of that as like what was going on in like, you know,
Well,
the southern US,
there's different kinds of slavery too.
Well, right. Exactly. There is different kinds of slavery, but also just mere servitude and like not really like you have to work for a master and whatnot. Like that was actually used to protect against greater evils like tribal warfare,
Hmm.
right? Because somebody's got to own the land, and
Yeah.
if not, then it's literally just gonna be tribal warfare, right?
Yeah.
It's up for and it's anyone's grant, right? Um,
And we also have to talk about, the, you know, as Americans, when we think of slavery, we think of slavery in the South. The South was not filled with Catholics.
that's right.
It wasn't filled with it was filled with I guess most of them were probably Baptist,
It was a mix of it was Baptists and then
Anglicans,
Anglicans, some
Methodists.
Methodists, yeah, and then also just other random kind of Protestant
Yeah.
groups.
And like they would change the Bible, because in Protestantism, there's a bunch of different types of Protestantism, and you know you're kind of your own pope,
Yes,
and you're kind of your own God too at that point.
that's kind of
Um,
yeah what it devolves into
and
the
that's
apotheosis. Yeah,
yeah, you become your own God because you get to decide for yourself what truth is.
there's no accountability really.
Yeah, and so
I mean, there still is because at least there's still kind of the belief that okay, at least if I'm not subject to the Pope, I'm still subject to God, but that's still not
yeah,
really the
but
same
the
thing.
problem is like problem is at that point it's like when you read the Bible, you're trusting in yourself. Like you may be like unintentionally like trusting in yourself,
Well, yeah,
and
and it's like if you read
you just
all the
gotta remember
stuff
like
about
it's not a good idea to always assume malice, or well, not malice. Like you don't always want to assume like, man, these people like they just hate the Pope and da 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 da. Like some of these people like, because I used to be a Protestant, and I see
yeah.
you just it's like, oh, I believe that Jesus is God, and here's his book. and I'm gonna read it so I can try to get closer to God. But the problem is just it's just subjective. But anyways, the point of us saying this is that the slave owners, they would teach Christianity to the slaves,
Yeah,
but they would also alter the Bible to how they felt fit,
that's right. Yeah,
you know? So the slaves didn't get any ideas of, oh, God himself is against slavery.
yeah.
It's very sad, and it's like, because the thing is like there's a separation between Catholics and Protestants. We're not, and I'm not doing this to bash on Protestants. I'm just saying, like, as Americans, when we think of Southerns, when we think of slavery in the U.S., we think of white Southerners enslaving black people. And the white Southerners were not, Catholic.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, like the southern, like the southern culture and society was really, in a sense, the last sort of remnants of the medieval world in America, because you got to remember, we might have talked about this on the other stream. Like Southerners came from like a different parts of the British Isles than the Northerners,
Hmm.
right? And they had a totally different culture, religion, and like just worldview, right? Um, and so they I lost my train of thought again.
Like they were the
That's
last remnants of
well,
medieval.
yeah, because it's like okay, like was there slavery, quote unquote, in the medieval world? Yes, but like um we're in the sense of like okay you work the land for your master and whatnot, right? And different noblemen own different lands, right? Which is largely just used for agrarian work,
Hmm.
right? um but and like that's the kind of the same thing in the South, except the only real difference is that the slaves have a different skin color than the masters,
Yeah.
right? And that's why people
And
assume
then
that
this is
like
also, we're getting to the time of, later on, the time of like Charles Darwin and,
yeah, because
you
that's
know,
also part of it.
Charles Darwin was 1850s?
Uh, Something like that. Yeah, like mid to late 1800s.
Yeah, it was like the mid 1800s.
Yeah, and that's another thing is the way that colonial people viewed slavery is quite different to how, people like in the antebellum South viewed slavery, you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Because it kind of evolved like because you got to remember America wasn't just this isolated country, and it's never been. And
Hmm.
we might do one about that later. But with the elites and the intellectuals and whatnot, and what was being passed around in these elite and intellectual circles, and how that information disseminated down, you have to see, okay, what was going on in the rest of the world, right? In Europe, right? That was when Charles Darwin wrote, um, well, first, actually, I think we should mention that's when Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, right? And then it's all about the class struggle. Okay, who are the working class here in America?
And then later it
Okay,
becomes a race struggle.
yeah, it becomes a race struggle because of that. And then also later, Charles Darwin comes, and then now, okay, and then the thing that people don't really, they either don't know it or they don't want to talk about it or say that it's made up is that the real title of his book, The Origin of the Species, is The Origin of Species and like how to preserve the preferred races,
Yeah.
right? Like it,
It it's like, if you're a Darwinist, your your source material for Darwinism is racism.
yeah. No, and race, I mean, I honestly think a lot of race is made up. It's
Yeah.
literally just the worldview of the
Yeah.
British Empire,
And yeah, you're
you
right.
know?
And of,
It's the mythos.
Charles Darwin, and I mean, I can understand why, he thinks we come from apes because he looks like one.
Yeah.
But
Well, and it was used to justify these British imperial enterprises of like, well, if it's all just chaos and it's all we just evolve from random chance and
yeah,
predator versus prey,
yeah,
and
we're the predator,
yeah, we're the English people, the
the
Anglo-Saxons,
alpha.
yeah, we just happen to be the people who evolved,
And
quote unquote, better than
Yeah,
other people.
and
So
that's
what's stopping us from just, oh, shut up, monkey man?
yeah, and that
We can
yeah,
just take your, yeah,
and that's why the Anglo can. That's why the Anglo can, because
the ang.
we gotta remember
No,
that.
no, it's just the
Gotta remember,
name.
yeah. But
Beware the eternal ang.
I, just slight little segues. And this gets into British South Africa and the fights against the Zulus. The Zulus, they're inferior. They're a different race. They're not the preferred race.
Yeah,
They're
whatever that
not
means.
and then the Nazis took it as they're not the Aryan race. But anyways, big thing I want to ask you because I know someone's going to mention this is what about slavery in Brazil? Brazilians were Catholic.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that, that shit was awful.
Yeah, and
Um,
they also abolished slavery a lot later than America did. I think it was the 1880s. Not a lot
that's
later,
not too much later
but
though.
they did. It was later
Yeah, no, it's that I
because
mean it kind of goes into the black legend, but I mean the numbers like you literally can't make that up. Like the average lifespan of like a slave in Brazil, like they didn't even make like I thought it was some crazy numbers. Like it didn't even make like 20 years old or some shit
yeah.
like that. It was crazy. Um, and then again, it's just like it's the same principle I would apply to the situation you told me with the Incan Emperor and like
Hmm.
the massacres and whatnot, where it's just like, and I think this was probably the tail end of that, is just the mentality of like, the secular world and whatnot, and just like the shit needs to get done. We need to impress the higher ups and you
Hmm.
know, the big money people and whatnot, and like the nobles, right? Um, So like basically the point of what I'm trying to say is that like there's obviously a huge different of like there's a huge difference in like okay, Brazil and like the Catholic Church and its people,
Hmm.
right, as opposed to like the actual like secular government of Brazil, right?
Yeah,
Which honestly I think that would be probably a lot more to blame than Pedro II,
yeah,
just like Louis
yeah,
the
yeah,
16th
and like
wanted to help
also
the
yeah,
slaves, yeah.
also it's like today. We have these groups that lobby in the government and have a lot of wealth and power, and they get to dictate the laws of the land, and then it becomes kind of a cultural entrenched thing. It's like, were they Catholic? Yeah, but like, were they Catholic like how a saint is Catholic? No.
Oh, exactly. I mean,
Um,
why do you think those people are not canonized? Like,
yeah,
that's another
yeah,
thing.
like there is. I don't think there is a single canonized slave owner.
Yeah, just think
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. I don't think that. I don't think there's a single one. But anyways, yeah, because like the slave owners, they it's literally big business, and
Well, yeah, and so if you can, if the, because Pedro II was exiled by the military elites and like the big money elites, right? Because he wanted to end slavery. But of course, that's not looking good to the pockets of the mean, evil, ugly
Mhm.
military
Yeah,
corporate
I
men.
have a really yeah. Keep going on that. I have
Yeah.
something to add to that. So now, that we kind of go over a little bit of the history of the colonialism. Let's talk about like, you know, real quick,
Oh,
the
how, how the
yeah, yeah, but like these countries eventually became independent from Spain. Napoleon invaded Spain and the countries with Simon Bolivar and other revolutionary uh personalities, I would say, rebelled against the Spanish, and but these countries still remained Catholic, and
but there's been historically debates actually between the secular sort of American inspired um, national figures in these Latin American countries as opposed to the faithful Catholic figures, right? And that's why the New World actually is kind of almost all the countries, not just America, have had these internal struggles, right? Of the Enlightenment secularism, which I mean America is founded on, and then also Latin America, I think, has more Catholic Christian or Catholic principles that it's founded on. But like it's like okay, we gain independence from Spain. Okay, we're Catholic, but some people are okay. Well, that's the religion of our mean, evil, ugly oppressors.
Mhm.
But then a lot of people are like, okay, we're independent from Spain, that we're good. But then, okay, no, but we still like Catholicism, right? So there's been debates of the role of the Catholic Church in the
Mhm.
government. I mean, that's
Yeah,
why the Central American
mhm.
Republic split up.
and
Um,
uh now I want to start talking about you know why is Catholicism good for Latin America? And also, we need to talk about the forces opposing Catholicism in Latin America.
yes, no,
But
exactly.
first, we should talk about why is Catholicism better for Latin America as opposed to Islam or
Protestantism,
literally
yeah,
Protestantism.
literally any. I mean,
Yeah,
Catholicism is better for everybody,
yeah.
right?
But like it like give like some like
Well, I think I guess this is kind of abstract, and this is uh kind of general. But when you just kind of think about it, and you know, you do research and look into a combination of testimony from people that you meet or testimony from people on the internet, just reading about it in books or articles. um you can get kind of the idea that people in the countries south of the border are far happier
mhm,
and have um
and not as stressed.
yeah, not as stressed and just have like better values, right, than what we have here in our country.
Yeah. I
um
mean, we know this firsthand because
yeah.
you're you your wife is from one of these countries and my fiance is from the same country, and it's these people, not all of them are Catholic and not all of them are really even
Well, no, but the
like.
principle is that they're ancestrally Catholic,
Hmm.
right?
And
Like in
so
the sense that, like, I know we talk about the Catholic versus Protestant countries in Europe, but a lot of those people are just secular, but they're culturally, like, ancestrally um, Catholic or Protestant, and that affects their day-to-day life and how they perceive things.
and like these people that aren't you know s- sacrificing each other, being constantly engaged in tribal warfare, like
There's parts of it where they
there
kind of are,
is
but
there is organized crime, and that is horrible. But
that's
it
kind of brought out by
but
the
it but
CIA,
yeah, but like
that's another
there
thing.
isn't
Yeah.
like really too much ethnic tribal war in Latin America. It's actually interesting to think about. Like, is there ethnic tr like in Mexico, for example?
Right.
Is there like any racial or ethnic tension? There is somewhere I know, but
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
is it on the same level as it would be in like an Islamic country or a Protestant country? No.
no, or even here,
Mm-hmm.
no, I wouldn't say so. I mean, 80, literally probably like 80% of Mexico is all just Mexican mestizo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're just a combination, um, of varying degree, of various proportions of Native American and Spanish, right? And all share the same, well,
Heritage.
right? So
Well,
they share the
they're
same,
they're Guadalupe.
right? I was gonna say they share the same language and religion for the most part. I know that there is communities in Mexico that do speak indigenous languages and whatnot.
And there's a few of them in Guatemala too.
Well, quite a bit actually in Guatemala. Um, if not probably more in Guatemala. Um, but so yeah, like the country at large, they're all more or less the same like heritage, right? And there is historic uh communities in Mexico that aren't like wouldn't be considered quote unquote mestizo, right? Like there's historically a lot of you know, well, when I say historically, I mean it's really just, in the last like, 100 years and whatnot. There's a lot of Germans who immigrated to Mexico. There's a lot of um German culture that influenced the mainstream Mexican culture, like corridos and um I don't know about banda, but like corridos and the polka, right? That is all, and like the norteño music, that is all rooted in German and Central European folk music, right? And then also there's Italians that moved to Mexico. There's a lot of Jews actually in Mexico City. And there's a small minority of Afro Mexicans from because like a lot of like there weren't a lot of African slaves sent out to Mexico because they had a lot of indigenous people there that could just you know serve as workers and whatnot. But in some parts, like on the coast and whatnot, there's little communities of Afro Mexicans. But yeah, I mean, just think I feel like it's less so over there because they share the same religion and the same language,
Language, yeah.
right? Because here in America, that's like literally almost non-existent at this point.
Yeah.
Like, there's no real majority that
There is
shares the
no
same
there
language.
is no American culture. There
There,
is, but like
no,
it's
there is, but historically, I mean, even from the founding, um,
it's more relative.
it is, and also, I mean, like even from the founding, like the Puritans and the Quakers in the North were much different than the Cavaliers and the sort of Scotch Irish in the South, right? So like America's never really been homogenous in the sense. I mean, like shared like shared language. I think if there's anything that Americans share nowadays, it's just we share the same. We all speak
We
more or
all
less.
speak English and go to Walmart.
Yes, like I would say the religion now, yeah, is just going to Walmart. But
But okay, let's get back to why Catholicism is good for
well, yeah, because like I was saying, you just get a sense that people in Latin American countries and Catholic countries abroad, like in Italy and France and Spain and whatnot, like people, for one thing, they're happier and less stressed because you don't work as much,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, obviously, I know we think like, oh, well, why can't we do that here in America? It's like, well, if we want to do that, which I wish we could, um, like we'd have to give something up, guys, because the reason that those countries get to work less than us is not just because of the culture, right, of the Catholic sort of, um,
Recreation.
yeah, like recreational laissez le bon temps rouler, like the Cajun
Hmm.
people and my people, and then like like the joie de vivre, the joy of life, which is just trying to the practice. It's the discipline almost of being in a good mood and just having the best.
And why are they able to be in a good mood?
And I would say yes, it's because of the Catholicism and the
Hmm.
framework they have to work with. And then as opposed to the Protestant work ethic sort of mentality of like, well, you might go to heaven, you might not, so you may as well just work and produce the most things you can,
Hmm.
because exactly because like, oh, well, what if you go to hell? Well, just constant fixation on like going to hell, right? Which
And
also adds distress.
yeah, and
And
so
then
yeah.
like you could see it's because of that, but also like those countries and whatnot, like other countries and like countries that are Catholic historically, like they just especially like in Europe and Latin America, like they have less things. Like people don't really understand that, or they do understand that and they don't really want to admit it. Like, guys, if we have air conditioning and we have indoor plumbing and electricity and a Walmart everywhere in every single block in America 24/7, like you need to maintain that, right? And so that's part of the reason why we have to work so much is just because we have more. And that's also why the cost of living goes up because we have to maintain all these other
Mm-hmm.
things,
All right.
right? Um,
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is just that it's just less stressful for the people. These people are happier. Their families are more intact. Um, they're not sacrificing each other to some demon.
yeah.
They're not, doing all the horrible things that Islam does, and they're not under the Chinese Communist Party. Well, yeah,
Well,
but now I think it's a good time to talk about like kind of like more about modern day. Um,
well, one more thing I wanted to say is I think another reason why people in these Catholic countries are happier is because if you look outside, you just step outside of your neighborhood, everything looks beautiful, right? You have these incredible cathedrals. You have these incredible like villas, right, in Italy with the the Mediterranean roofs, and you have that in Latin America too, and it's very sunny, right? It's very, I mean, it's hot, right? But with that, you get the sun, then you get endorphins from that, and then like the architecture looks beautiful. These cities were designed before cars, so everything is close together, right?
Hmm.
And the street vendors, right? So like, yeah, I mean, if you surround yourself with more beauty, then I think you in turn, like, you'll feel better, and like it's better for your soul,
Yeah.
your body, and your mind, you know?
Yeah. So,
Whereas if you look outside and everything is just urban sprawl, sproads with Walmarts and, you know, cookie cutter houses for miles and just boxes, right? And it's just this industrial monster, like just black and gray and just gross. Like, yeah, of course you're gonna feel black and gray and gross on the inside.
yeah,
Just soulless, yeah.
yeah, and
You know? Obviously not all America looks like that, but
yeah,
a
but
lot of it does.
it just I think in the whole history is filled with you know good and bad, but I think that Latin America got out got a much better deal by being colonized by Spain and Portugal than they would be I mean, you got to think like the the Islamic world cornered off Europe. The Islamic world it's very different values, and their mission was to spread Islam across the whole world. If they discovered Brazil, trust me, they would have. Who knows
Yeah,
what they would have
whatever
done?
unspeakable thing that you heard of.
They probably would have done to Brazil, to the natives of Brazil, what they do to the sub-Saharan Africans.
Or they would have done to the African slaves in Brazil, probably 10 times worse than the unspeakable things that they did,
Yeah,
right? Um,
it's really just it's lesser of two evils.
yeah, at that point, that's
Oh,
that's probably what it would
I
be.
think now would be a good time to talk about the Philippines. Spanish, like,
I actually don't really know too much about the Spanish
yeah,
conquest of the Philippines. I wouldn't really be able to comment on
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Another comment I guess with the understanding why Catholic peoples are happier, um, it's just because of just the actual theology, the theology of just like, you know, bad shit happens, but hope for the best, and we know that everything will be okay in the end because, you know, we have Christ,
yeah,
right? So you may as well just be with your family and the people you love
yeah,
and just have fun,
yeah.
you know?
And Christ isn't a warlord, and Christ doesn't tell you to, cut out the heart of your enemies. And Christ doesn't tell you to engage in tribal warfare to please some sort of animal god. And like, you know, the things that people don't like from the Catholic Church is like they're mean to gay people. It's like we're not really
Not
mean to gay
really.
people. I don't think, saying to someone, I don't agree with your it's not even like and the thing is like I can't, I can't, I can't judge someone because the thing is like the whole thing with the criticism against the Catholic Church, where it's like, they don't like gay people, they don't like it
Or they don't
when
like
you,
women. They don't
they
like
don't like
X thing,
women, they don't want you to enjoy yourself and da da da
which
da.
is
It's like,
actually bullshit.
yeah,
Because when you actually
but
compare,
you know,
like, yeah, I
and
talked to Jim about that.
the thing is like for Latin America, like even though it has a lot of problems and a lot of these countries like are not in good shape, but like the Catholic values build civilization.
Yeah, and I
You
think
know, like
just,
it's
yeah.
not destructive, it's constructive. You gotta think about it. You gotta think about this. Um, like if you ever listen to a homily, like they're always telling you things that are constructive for your personal self and for the community at large. They encourage you, stay with your wife. Don't cheat on your wife. Or, make sure you marry her have children and treat them well and love them as God would love you,
Right, and remember to
and
pray and trust
remember to
God. Like
pray and to
they're
trust
not
God and
they're
not
not
be.
teaching you any prosperity
Yeah,
gospel or that you're gonna go to hell and you're gonna go to
and the
hell.
priest isn't up there saying, "Oh, you need to go slaughter the next town over," or
And then you'll go to
you need
heaven.
to
Yeah.
kill the infidel." Like it's just honestly, it was a blessing for our world that, Latin America was colonized by, you know, the Spanish
Yeah,
and the
the two
Portuguese,
Latin powers. Yeah,
and
no, and
it was a perfect no, but I think for every single person's benefit on this planet, it was I think that them being colonized by those powers in particular is beneficial for every um everyone on the planet,
yeah. No, and it
it's
brought into contact
yeah.
the
Oh,
two continents,
now
and
would be a good time to talk about more about the Catholic Middle East.
yeah, like I guess I made the analogy that way back to Robert, a year ago, that like Latin America is basically just the Catholic Middle East because it's like these 20 something carved up countries that all speak uh in this case Spanish. In the Middle East it's like 20 different carved up countries that all speak like Arabic, and then they both have these sort of like, uh like ghetto like terrorist kind of thing that's like, promoted by like the CIA and then and like fostered and shit. And then everyone is like really religious, with like
Mhm.
the prostrations, and also like just like the bowing and the genuflecting and stuff like that. And it's poorer than like, like Europe and then North America and stuff like that. And yeah, I just thought that analogy was like perfect.
Anyways, is there any last thoughts? I'm pretty much tapped out here, but is there any last thoughts you have?
Yeah, I guess the point of what we're trying to say is, with Spanish colonialism and colonialism in general, we didn't even talk about the French colonialism and
Yeah.
whatnot. And of all these injustices that have happened, um, a big thing is that were there people that were evil and like enjoyed doing that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the predominant mindset was, well, if we don't do this and get this going to help like boost our country's economy and get us like stronger and whatnot, then worst powers in the world are probably going to take us over, right? Because you don't want your civilization to die out, right? That's what the Spanish fought for hundreds of years over with the Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula. And that's very similar to what's going on with AI. Like I remember Elon Musk was saying like, yeah, like this AI is kind of fishy and it's has very, strong like moral implications, but if we don't do it, then worse powers like Russia or China are probably going to do it. Don't necessarily agree with that 100%, but I see where he's getting at, and I think you could just apply that to that. Colonialism was kind of the AI of the
Yeah.
time, if that makes sense. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way to get the point across, and I hope you guys understood. This has been the Irrelevant Podcast. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you, Will.
Yep, you got it.